Hi, and so there have been a number of changes to Retribution Paladins, both past and future. They've just not really announced, but we've had a new PTR build for 7.3 where there are a number of changes to Retribution Paladins in terms of base abilities, in terms of talents, in terms of legendaries, relics. There's quite a few things to go over. I'm not going to go over that today though, because there are quite a few things to go over in my own mind. But today we've had some changes as well if you're in North America, or in a few hours time in EU, where we've had Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice buffed by 10%. So I talked about those when they were announced last week. But what are the actual effects of this? So I wasn't too sure exactly what they were doing, because the first announcement came that, okay, Crusader Strike, which is sort of our bottom damage dealer, and Blade of Justice, which is our top damage dealer, are getting a 10% buff. What is the actual effect of that? And it was quite difficult because people were naturally thinking, okay, well, that would also include, sure, like Divine Hammer and Zeal, sure, but they didn't say that. Divine Hammer and Zeal are both spells that replace the respective baseline abilities. They're not the same thing. And I basically assumed that Zeal, they would include Zeal in that, but that they wouldn't include Divine Hammer, because it looked to me like they were attempting to buff our single target without affecting our AoE, and such has been the case. So they clarified today, before North American Realms went live, that they would also be buffing Zeal by 10%, so that's included in the Crusader Strike thing there, but not, well, they didn't actually say we're not buffing Divine Hammer, but they didn't include that in there. And it seems from people that have been able to get on live in North America that Divine Hammer indeed has not been buffed, so it is just down to baseline Crusader Strike, baseline Blade of Justice, and Zeal. So there's two things about this that I was sort of investigating with a few sims. The first one is, how does that affect our damage? Now, I talked about this because I did a quick sim on this last week, but just to sort of confirm here. So I just did this for light movement, so as a standard single target fight, because that's what it's going to be affecting in the first instance. Now with my gear, obviously I simmed my character, different gear to you, and it was coming out at a 3.1% DPS increase. Now, there's been a lot of people asking on Discord and me directly, is this going to mean Rets aren't getting benched anymore? Because this has been the big thing this tier, you know, lots of Rets getting benched, blah, blah, blah. It has to depend on what the Ret is getting benched for. When we talk about Rets not being brilliant this tier, what I've generally been talking about are Retribution Paladins in the very top guilds, the ones who are really pushing. And they've generally been sat on, or almost exclusively, on Avatar and Kil'jaeden, Mythic. But most of us aren't even at that point yet. So, in terms of how it affects individual people, ask yourself this. Are you a Retribution Paladin? And if not, why are you watching this? But if so, are you being benched? If you are being benched, what's the reason for that? If the reason for that is, well, we'd bring you in if you're only doing about 3% more damage, then this is brilliant for you. But if it was something to do with the fact that you don't bring any utility and you're not doing enough damage to really compensate for the fact you bring no utility onto certain fights, then the reality is, no, it doesn't do anything for you. We're still in pretty much the same state we were before. It's just a little bit better. It's not that it's an unwelcome change. It is a very welcome change. How could we be possibly moan about this? It's a straight up buff, no argument about it. Does it go far enough? Probably not. But then our key problems have been in Tomb of Sargeras, like I alluded. We don't really bring anything extra to the fights. And on something like Avatar and Kil'jaeden, then our mobility is the issue. But by the time most of us get onto those fights, the DPS checks won't be so tight. So that mobility may not actually suddenly be an issue, in which case we're still okay. However, there has been one general change that I want to go over, and that is to our cleave, because Blade of Justice has been buffed, but not Divine Hammer. So that means relative to Divine Hammer, Blade of Justice is now going to do more damage. So we were already in the frame of mind in Tomb of Sargeras that we don't use Divine Hammer on single target. We'd only use Divine Hammer if there's a significant amount of AoE, or if there was regular 2-target cleave. So again, I was looking at my sims and updating the damage on Zeal, Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice, but not Divine Hammer. and having a look at this. So for a 2-target cleave fight, so that's assuming 2 bosses, a bit like Demonic Inquisition, only we probably wouldn't use it on Demonic Inquisition because although there's 2 bosses, we can't keep them stacked all through the fight because of Fell Squall and Bonesaw. But just in theory, that sort of thing. So I did it for 2 bosses. Now, with the new buffs, with Divine Hammer, if I took the Divine Hammer trait and, of course, Fires of Justice, because I'm not at a point where taking Divine Hammer and Zeal is a good thing for me. I'm not sure it is for too many people. Then that results in about 1.52 million DPS. Now, if I revert back to Blade of Wrath and Zeal, which is the single target spec, then it's more like 1.57 million. So it's actually pulls ahead with the single target there. So the bottom line is think very carefully before taking Divine Hammer on raid bosses. The only bosses where it might still be sensible would be, of course, on Mythic at any rate, Harjatan and Desolate Host, and then perhaps Mistress Sassine on Heroic. But I mean, that was sort of the case before anyway, realistically. But if a situation arose and you were thinking to yourself, 2-target cleave, then because I said in the last Essentials guide, Divine Hammer is a DPS increase on as few as 2 targets, even though it was only just. Now it's not. It's only a DPS increase on 3 targets now. So you need to bear that in mind when you're thinking about when to do it. Because even if you're on a fight that has multiple targets, think to yourself, how long are those targets up for? So on something like Mistress Sassine and Harjatan, if you're killing the ads really quickly on Heroic, say, think to yourself, is it worth me taking Divine Hammer for those few seconds on the Murlocs when the rest of the fight is just a single boss up? Mistress Sassine, you can argue the ads spawn very quickly, so at most times there are ads around. Harjatan, probably not so. So just you want to consider that. So anyway, those are the changes as they are now. Later on this week, I will be updating with the 7.3 changes because that will also potentially change the way we'll play. Of course, the 7.3 stuff has got time and will indeed change quite a bit before 7.3 goes live, but that'll be later this week when I've had time to fully digest it all. So I hope you found this useful. As always, if you did, don't forget to subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.